Hello everyone. Gmar Ktima Tova. Shana Tova to everyone. Should be a very blessed, healthy year in a revealed way. Abundance, materially, spiritually. Blessings for those that need to find their soulmate. May it be with the least amount of anguish. And blessings for those that have already found it, they should learn to embrace it. Healthy children. And Parnasa Barchova, which is a livelihood, expansive one. And we can all say, Amen. Amen. Being that is the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is a very special time. As I've discussed many times here, time in Judaism is understood as energy. So it's a flow of energy, not like a river, but more like a spiral. So, similar to how the planets and how the celestial bodies have their orbit, time too has its orbit. And every Rosh Hashanah, things begin anew. The cycle begins anew. It's like a new orbit on another axis, but in the same plane. Or I should say maybe on the same axis, but on a different plane. One way or the other. You get the idea. Like a spiral, like a spring. And the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where we are right now, are considered to be extraordinary days, 10 days of tshuva, 10 days of return. As the Talmud says, that this is a period where Dirsha Hashem b'motzei, reach out and call out to God, beseech God, when He's found, when He's to be found. Karua b'yesikarav, call to Him when He's close. And the Talmud asks, isn't He to be found and close all year round? God is always here. Yet there are layers, and there are times in the year where it's more conducive and easier to access. Just like when we have in relationships, in human relationships, when people are in a good mood, even though they love each other, when they're in a good mood, it's easier to communicate. When someone is not in such a good mood, even though we can't apply that to God, but the similar idea. So there are layers, there are too many veils, too many shrouds. So this period of time is easier to access. The analogy given for it in the Kabbalistic, Hasidic texts is that every soul is like a flame. And a flame originates from a mother flame. And it goes through its entire orbit, as I mentioned. And when it gets closer to the mother flame, what happens when two flames start getting closer to each other? They feel the tug. You feel the tug. You feel a warmth, you feel a tug. You see how flames, when they come close, they actually melt into each other. And the same is with this period in time, where the flame of each of our souls gets closer, and therefore it's much easier and more conducive, a higher state of consciousness with less distractions. Now you could say, well, I don't feel anything different today than yesterday and last week and 2 weeks ago and 10 weeks ago. Well, it's like anything in life. You can come into a completely new environment with all kinds of fresh possibilities, but if you are still in your old state of mind, in your old consciousness, then no matter what will happen around you, no one can save you. No magic here. You come to an environment that is upbeat and people are lively and lighthearted, and you're very heavy-hearted, your own disposition and mood is going to affect you for sure, and maybe even others. So it's like in any situation, you have to attune yourself to a particular state of being. If you know you're going into a particular special opportunity, and you study about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and you learn that these are special days, and the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur have a lot of such energy, and at least if you allow yourself to free yourself a bit of the past and your own despondence and your own negative self-image, that creates the container, that creates a certain level of attunement, that you're attuning and aligning yourself with what is happening around you. But if you don't do that, then even if you went to your own brother or sister's wedding, and even if it's the most beautiful simcha and joyous occasion, if you're not in the mood, you don't allow yourself to, if you don't let go of your own so-called past and your attitudes, clearly, no matter what's happening around you, is not going to penetrate. And you see this all the time. So in other words, one of the aspects of growth is not always actually changing something, is just really the opposite, letting go of an old pattern. Let's say you were invited and you're being invited now to a once in a lifetime opportunity to meet the king of the universe, the greatest of the great. And you can ask for anything. And if you go in with a negative attitude, what's going to happen? You'll lose the entire opportunity. If you, for at least for a few minutes, say, you know what, I'm going to let go of all my baggage as much as I can. Try to free myself. Try to think positively. Not allow my past to dampen the spirit. Then at least there's a fighting chance that something may penetrate. It's one of the harder things to do, perhaps, but that's what's asked of us. And that's how we execute change. Sometimes it's not through doing something differently, it's just allowing something different to happen. And if you don't allow that to happen, often then you become your own worst enemy. You know, I knew someone who had a very difficult childhood. And she went through a real difficult life, especially in her early years. At some point, enough was enough. She finally decided, I'm going to do something with my life and try to... a brilliant person, so many qualities, but did not have any dignity, any self-esteem, self-confidence, self-value, because of the abuse and the absenteeism and the sheer materialism that she grew up around. It's a lot of abundance, but no soul. She was like a broken soul in that, a broken spirit. And what she would love to do is go to the beaches, to water. Water has a soothing effect. It's warm. It has a certain supernatural side to it. It's not man-made. It has that ability to affect. She told me that she would often go in the most difficult times, but when you come with all your difficulties and try to throw them into the sea, it doesn't always work, because your own mood doesn't let you even experience. She said, sometimes I saw the beautiful ocean and the beautiful horizon and sunset and sunrise, and still I couldn't get myself into that type of place until she learned something I spoke about in the class, about you have to let go of some of your baggage that you carry inside of you. Because sometimes it's like a blinder. It doesn't even let you see a beautiful sunset. It doesn't let you experience a beautiful ocean. It doesn't let you smell the roses. It lets you experience a very harmonious and soothing environment. So it is partially dependent on us at least to allow ourselves to experience it. Or else it's literally like looking at something and not being able to see because there's so many veils. And this is a time of year, forget about what happened last year, 2 years ago, 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. It's a new beginning. You have to be able to see your life as a new beginning. If you're unable to do that, you're basically being held hostage by your past. I know the question is, what do you do with that? But you have to do everything possible. It's a will, sometimes it's bringing yourself into a place, but open to possibility of something different. That doesn't mean everything will suddenly change, but it means there's an openness. And when there's an openness, something seeps in. Exactly like healing an infection. Infections fester in closed environments, in sealed environments. One of the things you need to do is give it some fresh air, then it begins to heal. So, same thing psychologically. Something that we carry for a long time in silence, in pain, and so on, remains with us, embedded inside of us. And if you allow a little fresh air, a little opening, something, then that fresh air begins to have its effect, and it can begin to somewhat subside, somewhat diminish the infection. And this is true psychologically and so on. And it's all about expression tafasta meruba lo tafasta. It's not about grabbing a lot, in one shot, more than you can chew, biting more than you can chew. It's about step by step. The classic lesson of Rabbi Akiva, the drops of water, drop by drop by drop, but consistent and persistent. And unfortunately, many of our negative and past patterns and habits and routines don't allow us to bring in that fresh water, those fresh drops, and that's what this period of time is all about. So that's a general introduction. With that said, being that it's a Pre-Yom Kippur workshop, Yom Kippur will be this coming Friday night, which makes it a triple type of Shabbos, because it says Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbos, and that's a double Shabbos. Because Yom Kippur is even holier than Shabbos. That's why usually when a fast day comes out on Shabbos, we don't fast on Shabbat. Only Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is holier than Shabbos. So Yom Kippur is considered a double Shabbos, and now that it's on our Shabbos, it's like a triple Shabbos. So you get yourself all the opportunities. You hear that? Everything is open, even more than a regular year. And though it's a fast day on one hand, but it's not like a fast day like Tisha B'Av, which is a sad day, when we mourn the destruction of the temple and other tragic events. Yom Kippur fasting is actually because we try to become superhuman, try to transcend our regular routines of eating and other physical pleasures and delights that we partake. We're compared to angels. So on Tisha B'Av, it's more like sitting Shiva and mourning and grieving. You don't have an appetite when you're in that type of place. Here, it's beyond appetite, where you focus on trying to sustain yourself with some spirituality instead of material, as much as humanly possible. Not breathing, obviously, is not going to work. So, but not eating, refraining from eating, from drinking, from bathing, and from other things that are material pleasures, even the shoes we wear, and so on. That is what is Yom Kippur, is trying to free ourselves as much as possible from the material bonds that tie us. And that's why Kol Nidre means we free ourselves of our bonds. A neder, a vow, an oath, doesn't just mean a physical vow and oath. It means all the bonds, all the trappings, and all the stuff that locks us and traps us. So we'll dedicate this as a pre-Yom Kippur workshop. I want to dedicate it, made by Lori Katz in honor of her grandfather's yahrzeit, Yecheskel ben Avram Avinu. The yahrzeit is on October 5th. So in honor of his soul, may our teachings here and our learning, both here in this room and all over the world, whoever will be hearing this, be in merit of this neshama, this soul, as he continues his journey, while we continue our journey down on this plane, on this level. So we titled the class, How Deep is Your Soul? One of the things, it's almost the most obvious if you really think about it, when you speak to people, and I have had the privilege to speak to many souls in this world, both on a personal level, as a friend, sometimes trying to give advice, sometimes some objective perspective, counseling on other forms. So especially when people are dealing with troubles and dilemmas and difficulties. So one of the most important and critical things that always strikes me is when I see somebody, let's say for the first time, or even not for the first time, I always think to myself, I don't usually articulate it, but I always think to myself, what is this person made of? What capacity do they have? Do we even know? And even just that mere question, when you meet somebody, you think, what is their capacity? How deep is their soul? What's going on? How much potential they contain? That alone is a humbling experience. Because when you think about it, we have to admit we have no clue. That as much as we know about any one of us, even about ourselves, someone to ask you, how deep does your soul go? How far can you achieve? How much can you achieve? How much potential do you have? If you're an honest person, you'll say, how do I know? I never went all the way down to the deepest part of my innermost recesses. I know something, but the logic would state, whatever you know, there's a lot more that you don't know, even about yourself, let alone of someone else. And that itself, that attitude, is actually a very powerful healing tool. The Baal Shem Tov says that each person's eretz chayfetz is like a earth, like a piece of land that you inherit, that's filled with precious jewels and precious stones and resources that no one can even know. Imagine you buy a home or you inherit a home, and then you start digging underneath and you find unbelievable treasures. Earth is like a force that conceals that which is within. So each of us is like a treasure chest filled with unbelievable amount of resources, which shouldn't surprise us because we were created by God, and God infused in us all kinds of powers. And no one can deny that we don't know how much. We all know, all we know is that it's more than you can imagine. So just that alone, even if you meet someone who has very difficult life, and they're experiencing terrible anguish or agony, and suffering and loss and pain, depression, and so on, the first thing I always think of is, look, what possibilities does this person really have? Forget about now whether they are aware of it, whether they believe it or not. Obviously, part of feeling so down about yourself is you're not even thinking about what you're capable of. You don't feel capable of anything at that point. You feel you're totally worthless. You're totally powerless, demoralized. But that's the first statement. So when you want to think about this period in time in which we are right now, there's a special prayer we say in these days, the Sefer Simei Tshuva, 10 days of Tshuva. It's called Mamamakim Karasicha Hashem. What does it literally mean? Wish I had English translation, but I'll translate it on my own. Mamamakim Karasicha Hashem. It means from the depths. In Hebrew, omak is a depth, is like a deep, at the depths. Ma'amakim is plural, from the depths, not from the deep, but from the depths. Karasicha, I call to you, God. Question is, what depths are we talking about here? So most literal means from your depths, from the depths of your soul. When things are going regular in our lives, a regular day, so to speak, a usual routine. So then, you invest your usual faculties in whatever it is you need to do. But when you're in a state of despair, or a state of anguish, or a state of need, what do you do? And what does a healthy person do? A healthy person calls out, cries out, help. We call for help. When you call for help, you yell. You reach deeper inside yourself and you try to muster up the energy, I need help. If a person cannot yell like that, it's usually a sign of a very dysfunctional situation, because they don't even have the strength or the confidence to call for help. So even though no one should ever have to call for help, but it's at least, if you're in a crisis, calling for help happens to be the natural response. Think of it like, God forbid, when someone has a stroke, and they can't even feel the pain because they get numbed. And the day they can feel the pain, even if it's very painful, is a better day than when they don't feel the pain. The classic story when the doctor comes to test and see where a patient that's healing from a stroke or from another form of paralysis, and he pricks and one day the patient starts yelling and the doctor starts laughing. He says, "Why are you laughing, doctor?" "I'm in pain." He says, "Because for 2 months I've been doing this and you didn't feel anything. You didn't cry out." So the first sign of life is that we cry out. Again, no one should ever need to cry, but if there is a situation, it's a healthy thing because it means you're sensitive. Once you lose that sensitivity, you don't even cry, where you get locked and trapped inside yourself, then there's not even that ability to do something about it. You become so paralyzed that you don't even reach out. So in these days, we call out from the depths of our soul and our heart, and we dig deeper. And when you dig deeper, you have more power. They tell the story that the Kotzker Rebbe was once walking in Kotsk, and was there a river, and he hears a man yelling for help. He goes and sees a guy's deep in the river, and he's crying out for help. He's drowning. He can't swim. The Kotzker Rebbe couldn't swim either. The guy's saying, "Rebbe, save my life, save me." Kotzker says, "If I come out, we'll both drown because I can't save you. I don't know what to do." And he's bobbing up and down. He's going down. His head is down. He's already lost all his energy. And Kotzker sees things are really, his hands are flailing, and he's like really desperate. So Kotzker says to him, yells out to him, "Listen, when you get down to the bottom of the river, send my best regards to the Leviathan." Leviathan is the big whale we call the Leviathan. Leviathan, I don't even know how to pronounce it in English. It says when Mashiach will come, this Leviathan will be a big meal for all the righteous people. So it was like a type of sense of joke he was telling him. The guy started laughing. And because he started laughing, he had a little more energy, and he was able to finally find a way back to shore. Kotzker Rebbe obviously wasn't trying to tell him once you come to the bottom and drown. He told him this thing. That was the way he saved him. So sometimes laughter, it also comes when we bellow. You ever have a bellow laughter? What about you? You ever like almost like your whole body freezes up in laughter where you can't control yourself, like you're in stitches? Have you had that experience? So laughter also comes from a deeper place. That's why Yitzchak, who we talk about so much in this period of time, we read about Yitzchak, Rosh Hashanah. Yitzchak comes from the word laughter. Tzchok. Why? Because when his mother heard that she's going to have a child at 90 years old, she started laughing. Interesting. She laughed, which was not considered a sign of respect. And that became the name of her son, Laughter, because there's laughter. Laughter is able to open up new doors. So it's another form of reaching deeper in. So Mamamakim, we call from the depths. So when someone asks the question, how much of your potential has been actualized, you can't answer a question like that without first knowing how much potential you have. Let's say you have a potential of 100, just using a number, and you've actualized 10. So then it's 10%. But what happens if your potential is 1,000? So this period in time, we focus on understanding how deep is our soul. Alice in Wonderland has the question, how far down does the rabbit hole go? Which became a type of cliche or a word that we use when someone's trying to understand the unconscious or trying to understand the forces beneath the curtain, beneath the surface, behind the curtain, deeper levels of a consciousness. How far does it go? Who knows? Today we know, for example, that all matter is made up of elements. Elements, the elementary table, is made up of molecules. Molecules, in turn, are made up of atoms. Atoms are made up of subatomic particles. So how many do we have so far? Elements, molecules, atoms, subatomic. We know now today that subatomic particles have subatomic particles. And someone will ask, how far does it go? Who has a clue? It could be infinite. It can be so many layers. What do we know? And the more we climb the mountain, or the more we dig deeper under the earth, and also, I mean that metaphorically, in our own consciousness, the more we discover realities that are impossible to imagine. Whether this is urban legend or not, it still is up for debate. In 1898, the U.S. patent officer resigned, they say, due to the fact he said that everything that could be discovered has been discovered. That was the telegraph, electricity, the photography already. Of course, the Industrial Revolution brought with the turbine, the steam engine, and so on and so forth. And that was it. It was a very big period of growth then, the late 19th century, with tremendous amount of innovation. That was the time of Edison and many of the other so-called innovators, and Thomas Edison, and he resigned. Today it's laughable when you hear about it. It's 1898. For all the advancements, we still did not have the atom. It was before Einstein's theory of relativity and special relativity. It was before quantum mechanics, before nuclear energy, before the computer age, before everything that we know today. It's transformed the entire world. Today, you can say, okay, what about now? Maybe now we should resign. Because look how much more no one's resigning. Why? Because now we know that when you think it's all been discovered, you realize there's whole dimensions. Today, with more discovery, we've become more humble, at least in our awareness, that who knows what else there is out there. What else is possible? Is this not a lesson for our own personal lives? What do we know about this little character here? I'm talking about each of us sitting right here, and anyone out there in cyberspace. A body, a human being with a frame of, let's say, 5-6 feet, not a lot in the scheme of things, 100 pounds, 150 pounds. Should we go higher than that? Okay, fine. But even if higher, how much higher can you go? What do we know about this? We know a lot. Medical advancements have been literally breathtaking. Longevity has doubled since 1930, which was, I think, a 47-year-old in longevity. Life expectation today, it's 80. Women a little more than men, longer than men. Many advancements, but we still know so little. And I say this even when I speak to doctors, speak to scientists. Even of the basic body functions, let alone take the brain. The brain, we haven't even scratched the surface. With all that we know, it's still that this brain, the size of the palm, a little more than the palm of my hand, that has the ability to process. How many ideas, for example, can your brain contain? When you buy a computer, we know it used to be 5 meg, then it was 100 meg. I remember 5 meg for $5,000 in 1982. Today, 5 meg fits into your alarm clock or calculator. Then 100 meg, then 1,000 meg. Then started gigs. Now there's gigabytes, and then there's trigabytes, and it goes on and on. So you buy a computer, it tells you the capacity. A very big capacity, and a lot that can save a lot. But you know something? It keeps growing because they create more files, and the files are larger, etc., etc. Pictures and then videos. But you know the capacity, and when you hit the capacity, your computer tells you there's no more room left. Tell me, what's the capacity for a brain? How many ideas can you contain? The answer is we have no clue. Because no one's ever reached a point where the red light went on and said, hey, no more ideas in your brain for this lifetime. Unless I'm mistaken. I've never heard anybody ever come back with such a thing. even big brain, even people who have many, many ideas. How many books can you memorize? I mean, there are people, whether go to university or doctors or others who have to memorize, lawyers, books upon books. Each in their own particular school of thought, scholarship. How much? Where's the limit? And the brain is what? The brain was not created by engineers at Intel. And it doesn't like Watson's law that every year, whatever, the capacity doubles. This brain is the same brain as we've had for many years. And what is its capacity? We have no clue. And this is just plain memory. Take the processing of the mind, its ability to abstract, its ability to imagine, to dream. How much capacity does your brain have? No man on earth, no woman on earth can answer that question because we have no clue. We do know, however, that it's far, far more than we can ever imagine. And what about your heart? Feelings. We know when we're overcome by feelings, especially feelings of grief or pain, that how deep and profound that can be. But how deep does it go? Can you go deeper than that? And the answer to all this is that word ma'amakim that I'm using here, that we say in these days, in the prayers of these days. There's depths in your soul that are far beyond you can never imagine. Just the mere fact, I go back to that statement, just knowing that is already a freeing experience. Because it means, so you're ready to go ahead and say and write the final script on your own life, that I'm worthless and hopeless and things cannot get better, when you don't even have a clue how much power you have inside of you. So imagine someone, you meet somebody, and you know that they have the power to run, let's say, a marathon for 20 miles. They tell you, I can't even run 5 feet. And you say, I personally know you can run all, but they do not believe in themselves. How tragic is that? That you have the potential, you don't even believe you have the potential. So that's why sometimes it's easier to look at others, because looking at yourself, we're subjective. We have our own self-loathing, our own self-destructive mechanisms, etc. You look at another person, as I said. You see a person. You see this person, no matter what's happened in their life, even if they're behaving in ways that are not always so pleasant, what is the capacity of their soul? Endless. And this is a fundamental principle in Jewish thought, especially the mystical and Hasidic teachings. That's how a real chassid looks at somebody. You never look at only what you see. What you see is what you see. You look at what they're capable of. Now, obviously, you want the capable to become actual. It's not enough. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, once told somebody, he said, you have such a great mind, you could achieve so much, you could be such a scholar. He says, Rebbe, we know that whenever I want, I can do it. He says, yeah, but that's the potential. Just like a thief is not someone who could steal, but someone who steals, a scholar is not someone who could learn, but someone who learns. So obviously we're talking about actualizing, but the first step in actualizing is knowing and believing in yourself and believing in that capacity. As you know, I always, we all love children, but I always observe children, I see them as the best teachers in our lives, because they are untouched by adults and by humans, at least in their younger years. Like freshly fallen snow. Freshly fallen snow just has that pristine effect on us, because it's like untouched. Just came straight from heaven. So you look at young children, and I study it all the time. I see my grandchildren, I look and look. Every time I see a child, I think about it. Children are a perfect example. If you ask the child, if you're able to have a conversation with a child, and say, how much potential do you have? The child behaves like there's no tomorrow. Can do anything. The child will explore. They have no fears. There's no inhibitions. There's no voices telling the child to stop until an adult says stop. That's why I find it always very difficult to tell a child that. Now, obviously, you need to discipline a child not to do destructive things and also not to be spoiled either. But on the other hand, there's a certain exuberance, a certain even irrational exuberance or super rational exuberance. There's so much to learn from that. Same thing when you meet adults, people who have that type of gung-ho, go-getter attitude. And I don't mean naive people who just are battering rams and they just knock everything down in their way. I don't mean that. People who have that spirit where a challenge comes their way, the first thing they'll say is, okay, let's figure out how to do it. And then, of course, we have the majority who will say, we can't. For this reason, for that, for that. You all know the difference when you're with that type of person and when you're that type of person. The former gives you life, even if you don't have full confidence, but it's contagious. And the latter just reaffirms all the negative attitudes, and okay, of course it's impossible. It was a nice thought. It was a nice idea. This is the attitude when you ultimately, without getting into the empirical and scientific discussions about God and about soul and so on, just simply on a psychological level, the mere fact that we don't see ourselves just as creatures of habit, just as products of environment and a product of circumstances, but that we have mysterious levels of depth within us that remain beyond our anything we can fathom. That is the best ingredient for a very healthy life, because you always have what to look forward to. There's no such thing as no, it's over, it can't work, because there's always deeper resources. It's like saying, you know what? Okay, I haven't dug well, I'll dig deeper. That's the message of this period in time. So as we enter these days, and we're traveled through these days going toward Yom Kippur, essentially it's a journey into the core of your own soul and your own depths, and believing that everything is possible, because once you reach there, then there's a new reality. So if someone says to you, I can't run, I can't do this, I can't do that, the response is, yeah, based on your present state of mind, you can't do it. But if I teach you another state of mind, teach you at least, or let go of your old state of mind, it may be possible. That's what we need to tell ourselves. That already is the opening, by recognizing that there is more than you may know. And that letting go is essentially what this period in time is about, what Yom Kippur is all about. The ability to recognize the mystery of your own soul, depths of your own soul. Now, in Jewish thought, Kabbalistic thought, Hasidic thought, talk about 5 levels of soul. Talk about nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. The Medrash says the soul has 5 names. 5 names are actually 5 dimensions, with yechida being the deepest, and nefesh being the most surface level. What is the difference between the 5? So nefesh is the level called biological life. Essentially the medical interpretation of what it means to be alive, that without a heart, with your heart beating and a brain working, and the vital organs functioning, that's called life, nefesh, biological life. So you're alive, you're breathing, your heart is beating. But we all know that would hardly be called real life, full, complete life. Because you can also have someone, God forbid, in a hospital bed, a vegetable, and they're also breathing, or you could have someone walking around this earth and they're like a walking zombie. You ever hear, I feel dead. So biologically, yes, nefesh is there. Comes the second level, ruach. Ruach, which also means spirit, is emotional life. You're feeling something. You don't feel dead. You're experiencing attraction, repulsion. You're reacting to things, emotional stimulation. That's level 2. Does it end there? No. Level 3 is intellectual life. Your mind is robust, is vibrant, is fertile, a fertile mind. Ideas, creativity, innovation. That's neshama, level 3. Okay, with that concludes a first group of the 5, what we call in Kabbalistic and Hasidic language the koiches pnimim, which means the immanent faculties. Because everything I just described is conscious life. The biological is just the minimum, just the mere fact that it's alive, as opposed to dead. The ruach is emotional life, but it's conscious. You're consciously aware of your emotions. You're feeling love, you're feeling pain, etc. And then there is intellectual life. That again is a conscious. Then come the next 2 dimensions, which go into we'll call them the more super-conscious dimensions of the soul. And one is called chaya. It's number 4, level 4. And chaya we'll call it transcendent life. The first 3 are all functional conscious dimensions. This is already transcendent. That's when you're experiencing something beyond just what your mind and your heart are feeling. You experience something beyond you. Transcendence can translate in many ways. It could be through romance, It could be through travel, it could be through music, through art, through religion, faith, spirituality. Transcendent. So now we're already dealing with not an immanent faculty, you're dealing with something that hovers somewhat of a more of a mysterious dimension of life. Like someone will say to you, okay, describe life. So you could give the medical definition of life. Medical definition of life, the heart is beating, the brain is functioning, the organs are functioning. That's the medical definition. Give me a description of emotional life. I feel things. I feel pain, I feel love, I feel attraction, so on. Stimulation on that level. Give me the intellectual definition. The mind is working, the mind is fertile, as I mentioned. But then someone will say, is that it? The answer is no. There's a mystique to life. There's something that you can't quite put your finger on. A living person isn't just a matter of biological, emotional intellect. There's something about life that is, I can say it's indescribable, but you know it because you have it. It's more of like, to be alive is more than the sum of those three parts. And that touches already on the transcendent. There's something else going on. And it has a certain element of elusiveness. You can't really put your finger on it because it's something beyond. But it's part of your life as well. When you experience magical experience, you've had magical moments in your life? Please say yes. It's too depressing to hear it. Absolutely. Everyone's had some, even once. Magical moment. What's a magical moment? It's much more than just a biological and emotional and intellectual experience. It's uplifting. It transports you to another time and place. Music can do this, as I said. Nature. It's just that feeling where you feel exuberance, you feel euphoria. This is chaya. So there is a sensation. However, it's not quite localized. You can't define it by this or by that. It doesn't have parameters. It's more of a just being lifted to another place. Okay? For some people, exactly. You'll soon see that's what we're going to get to. It is Shabbos. And then comes the fifth level. The fifth dimension actually is the fourth and more, but is the opposite of sensation. It's a place of inner peace where you're not even experiencing being uplifted, but you completely belong where you feel that you belong where you are. You feel a sense of actually complete awe. But it's not like that transcendent exuberance I just described. That's a feeling being uplifted. I feel happy. I feel ecstatic. Yechida, the fifth is called oneness. Just a state of oneness. It's even beyond sensation. That's like in a moment where the deepest form of love, where you don't even think about it. See, the fourth level is, I said there's a certain element of sensation, of consciousness. It's not conscious in the sense, like, let's say, an intellectual idea or an emotional feeling, but it's still something that is that is definable. Number 5 is undefinable. It's silence. It's called mamadaka, the subtle, silent voice within. Very deep level of serenity and calm, which is not so. It's more common to have the magical moment I described. This is already a serenity and calm that is of a different dimension. The interesting thing is this fifth level is also a level. It's still not the actual soul itself. That's why the soul has 5 names. All of these are 5 manifestations of the soul. The soul itself, we can't even talk about. Okay. Now, here's the beauty of the Jewish traditional structure. Every day, how many prayers do we pray a day? 3. Morning, Shachrit, Mincha, afternoon, and evening, Ma'ariv. They correspond to Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Because on a daily basis, the daily routine, we're basically functioning on a conscious level of existence, which includes, as I said, the biological, the emotional, and the intellectual. How many prayers on Shabbat? 4. We add a 4th prayer, Musaf. After the morning prayer, we say another prayer after the reading of the Torah. That corresponds to the Shabbos transcendent experience. You're not so immersed in the material world, you're experiencing the magic of Shabbos. And once a year only, we pray 5 prayers. Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur, we have the evening prayer, we have the morning, we have Musaf, we have Mincha the afternoon, but then we have that extra prayer before sundown. It's called what? Ne'ilah. When all the gates are open, right before they close at the end of Yom Kippur. As the sun sets on Yom Kippur, that's when we say Ne'ilah. Right before the half hour before the sunset. Hour before. Because Yom Kippur touches Achaz Bashana. Yom Kippur is called the one and only, the exclusive day. It touches that oneness. And that's why Yom Kippur is such a serene, silent day. It's not with a lot of pomp and circumstance. It's simple. We wear white. We dress down, not up. It's not a fancy type of celebration like, let's say, other holidays. It's in its simplicity. You're experiencing the purest. The color white is considered to be the color of purity, because every other color has some sensation to it. Blue evokes certain reactions. Red, of course, is like, that's why you see red lights. Red evokes fear in people. It evokes stay away. Blue evokes warmth. These colors are used very much in all kinds of subliminal messages. Every time you walk into a supermarket, every time you walk into any marketing, these colors that are so invisible on one end, but they evoke things. Color white doesn't have a sensation. It's just the purest color. Like the color white of light. Light is white light. The colors of light that we see as a prism is light being bent. So bent light will produce a color. But light in its purest form is transparent. So whiteness is transparency. That's when you feel a seamlessness, where there's no sensational. You just belong. You're here and you feel you belong here. It doesn't need to have any type of experience. It doesn't have to be biological, emotional, intellectual, even transcendent not. It's just there. So Yom Kippur, we go through all 5 steps. And the Ilah is the ultimate. But the general day of Yom Kippur is called the day of 5 prayers, the day of the 5 dimensions of the soul. So right there, you talk about depths of our soul. Right here I mentioned 5. And each one of them, you can imagine, has many, many layers. Even biological life, I described before, is filled with mystery. Let alone emotional life, intellectual, transcendent, and of course, Yechida. So you have somewhat of a map by which to navigate. If you have my book 60 Days, especially in the Yom Kippur prayer section, I actually describe and talk about how the meditations one can have on Yom Kippur when you say these different prayers. So wherever you'll be Yom Kippur, and hopefully you find a place where you can feel good to pray, try that journey. Take the 5 prayers. Doesn't matter how many prayers you actually say, but those 5 time periods in Yom Kippur. And if you have the 60 days, it'll definitely help you, because I describe the prayers and how they associate with these 5 dimensions. But it's essentially an exercise of traveling inward. What am I made of? The first thing to know is to look. Maybe just stop looking outside, start looking inside. That doesn't mean you're going to find everything by looking, but by shutting down some of the outer stimulation, things begin to emerge. What happens, let's say, when a person closes their eyes, their ears, their nose, their taste and touch? What happens? Those are the 5 stimulated senses, our sensory life. Our eyes, we see things. Our ears, we hear sounds. Our nose sense. Our what did I miss? Then this I said, sight, sound, touch, and taste. So with our taste buds, we taste. And finally, touch. You touch things. Imagine an experience where none of the 5 senses are active. And there are experiences like that. You close your eyes, you close your ears, you shut everything down. You will feel yourself. That's why so many of the exercises in a lot of spiritual disciplines are associated with breath. Like they tell you to just close everything, close your eyes and just feel yourself breathing. Because then but even breathing is a sensation, but it's closer to what's going on internally. So the senses, the sensory stimulation, actually hyperstimulation of our lives, tend to drown out the more subtler sounds. What happens if you have someone playing a beautiful piece of a violin, but you're in the middle of the rush hour in New York City or any other city in the world? No way you're going to hear it, because it's completely drowned out by the loud noises. So even though they compare jazz to the sounds of the street, but it'll definitely drown out more subtle sounds. What about the sounds of your own soul? Your cry of your soul, which, by the way, is very much emulated in the blowing of the shofar, which we will sound once at the end of Ne'ilah, on Yom Kippur, but Rosh Hashanah, of course, is the main day of shofar blow. Shofar is a simple sound instrument meant to reflect the closest possible, the closest approximation of the sound of your soul, like the sound of a child crying. Shofar has that type of haunting sound. And 3 types of cries: a long wail, short staccato, and short wails. So, when you're able to shut down the sounds around you, which is what Yom Kippur is about, it says don't have meals, don't eat, and don't drink, and don't get involved in other material activities for that day. It's meant to drown out as much as possible. It's meant to silence and subdue all the forces that are so much active in our lives. I'm not even talking about texting now and all the other stuff that we do with our mobile gadgets and devices. And then, if you do it correctly, what happens is something returns. The voice of your own soul begins to emerge when you shut those off. I don't know if you've ever spent, let's say, a week or 2 away from the city, away from work. You go to a countryside or some other place where you're disconnected from life and you're not seeing the newspapers and television and definitely not checking out your phone all the time. What happens to most people when they're in that situation? So, of course, we have to explain most people have very big withdrawal symptoms and they can't wait to get back and they just can't stand it. But if you allowed yourself to surrender to it, what would happen? You're suddenly in a different type of state of mind. The calmness, nature begins to take over. You look up at the stars in the sky. You see the cycles of the day come and go. You start seeing things you not even notice. Let's say in a place like New York. Yes, we have a few trees here and there, but we've taken a natural habitat and turned it into concrete and metal and iron and bricks and so on. I'm not here knocking modern progress, whatever you want to call it, and we've left because humans still need some nature, so we created a superficial Central Park or Prospect Park in Brooklyn. And we leave a little room between the concrete. We leave a tree, so it reminds us there's trees. But once upon a time, leave the world alone, what would happen? The exact opposite. All this is superimposed. And life is very simple and natural. Simple may not be the right word, but it's a whole different. And then when you're in that environment, you suddenly feel a whole different level of calm. Now, I'm addicted New Yorker, as many of you may be, which means this high-octane life, and the city never sleeps. So, of course, I understand what that. But it's, at the end of the day, it's an addiction. The natural state of a human being, what a human being needs, does not need necessarily this high-octane, this high-speed life. Look at children. Children are perfectly at peace in a country. Give them some grass, let them crawl around. They need love, they need nurturing, they need validation, and that's all they need. I'm not talking about our physical needs, food and so on. But we become addicted to this diet of constant stimulation, hyperstimulation. Television and other things don't help. They just are all superimposed, assaulting essentially. It's a full-out assault on our senses, on our psyches. And you see that all by contrast when you go on a cruise, on a boat, or you go to the woods, or you go some natural habitat. You literally can see it's like 2 different human beings. The calm is so different. This is just an example of what it means to shut down some of the extracurricular sounds and allow what? Cold mamadaka. Which means the subtle, cold mama, the subtle, gentle voice within, which is drowned out by so many other sounds. The story with Elijah the prophet, and he was looking for God. So first came a great thunder, and so maybe that's God. And he said, Loi barash, no, it's not in the thunder. Then came a great lightning. So he said, no, it's not Loi ba'esh, it's not in the fire. And then came what was the third thing? Loi barash, Loi kol, Loi ba'esh. Wind, a great wind. Loi baruach, no, it's not in the wind. And then the next verse, a beautiful verse that says, Chol mamadaka, a very subtle, gentle voice. You can barely detect it. And realize that is the divine experience. We live in a world where a lot of noise, a lot of sound, a lot of vision, things have to be fireworks. So it has its effect on us. But the most natural place of a person, what is a child? What is each of us? What did you do for 9 months in your mother's womb? The most formative time of your life is the first 9 months in your mother's womb. What did you hear all day? You know what you heard? The rush of water and the sound of a heartbeat. That's what you heard. That's all you heard. The sounds that a fetus hears are now documented because there's a certain rush, inside the body there's a certain, it almost feels like water running. And the sound of a heartbeat. Think about it. Try to emulate that. Just listening to water running and a heartbeat superimposed over that. And basically protected from all other sounds in the world. Child does not hear outside noises. I mean, there are experiences where they'll jolt a fetus. We see they'll jolt a child when there's a very loud noise or other things. But that's rare, and more importantly, most of it is drowned out. Most of it is protected. So it's interesting. That's how we began. 9 months, that's a long time. And not just 9 months. The 9 months are our most formative time. That's when your psyche was shaped. We don't remember it. The Talmud goes further and says during those 9 months we also are taught the entire Torah, which means basically our psyche is downloaded with all the information we'll need to discover truth in this world and so on. And then we emerge into a world that's full of noises, full of sights and sounds, tastes, touch and smell. All of that is non-existent in the womb. Whether the child smells, we don't even know when the olfactory nerves develop, but it doesn't matter. The point is, that's what's very natural. That's why we are so. You ever go swimming? You go underwater for a moment. Why is that so calm and served? Because suddenly the world gets quiet. You don't hear anything. It's exactly what you experience for 9 months. That's why it's literally like a recreation, a reenactment of your life in its earliest formative years. Water in general does that for us. It's cleansing, but it's also another thing is being immersed, completely immersed in a presence that's beyond you. It's an unbelievable concept. In the Baal HaTanya writes, says, the word for tevilah, when we immerse in a mikveh, in a ritual bath. A mikveh is essentially if you've ever seen one, like a ritual bath of water. There are different types of mikvahs. There are mikvahs that are still water. There are mikvahs that are connected to a live spring. For example, the Arizal's mikveh in Tzfat is a live spring water. It's cold in that sense. What is the mitzvah of tefillah? So it's a total immersion. Take off all your clothes and you totally immerse, not leaving even one drop of your body exposed outside of the water. Anything would be called, if you wore something, I mean, obviously if something's life-threatening, you need a Band-Aid, but if there's no life-threatening, you try to get rid of any type of what's called chatzitza. Anything so you're completely absorbed and immersed in the waters. And the word in Hebrew is tevilah. Tevilah. Tezveh, which is, he says, is the letters habitl. What is habitl? Bitl means you're completely submerged, completely subjugated in a presence beyond your own. As I mentioned before, when you go swimming, you go underwater, you feel that sense of serenity, silence. This is what a child is like for 9 months. It's completely submerged in the embryonic fluids, the fetus inside of the womb, floating in the embryonic fluids of the mother's womb. Now we know that microcosm, macrocosm, the whole universe also began that way. The Medrash and Talmud say that the world began mayim b'mayim. Everything was submerged in water. That's why on day 2 of creation it says God had to separate the higher waters and the lower waters. Everything was surrounded by water. Which is essentially how each of us begins our lives. 9 months submerged in another presence inside our mother's womb within the embryonic fluids. The analogy of water is ein mayim elatera das, meha das atar. Water is symbolic of knowledge. When you truly know something, do you own the knowledge or does the knowledge own you? So if your ego is involved, which definitely will compromise any ideas that you try to assimilate, but true knowledge is, when you really get into the zone, you become absorbed in the knowledge that you can't even distinguish between you and what you know. As soon as you say there's an object and a subject, I know this, you already created a divide. There's a point where you know something that you become completely one with what you know. As a matter of fact, you become like uplifted and submerged in that knowledge. That's why you have the expression that when Mashiach comes, Isaiah says the words, the world will be filled with divine knowledge as what? As the waters cover the sea. So the sea is like us, the sea bed. And the water is completely submerged. This is the purest experience. That's why we recreate it when we go to the mikveh, which is a mitzvah to do before Yom Kippur. Not on Yom Kippur, but before. Because we're trying to reconnect to that purest moment of birth where you were not being affected. The Koil D'Mamadaka, the silent, subtle voice that is not drowned out by the rash, by the thunder, and by the lightning, and by the wind. It's silence. It's a quiet place. Returning to that type of embryonic state, rebirth. And that's what Yom Kippur is all about. So Yom Kippur itself, the day of Salem, day of white. As I mentioned, whiteness is the same idea. It's purity. Colors are loud. Blue has its loudness, has its sound. Red has its power. White does not elicit that type of reaction. White is like essentially the opposite. It's not expressing something, it's lack of expression. It's like silence. So white in the world of colors is like silence in the world of sound. What's called in Hasidic and Kabbalistic language, the Geven Ha'atzmi, the pure, the core color. When you bleach everything, it turns white. That's why you say that we talk about cleansing the sins until they turn white. Whiteness on Yom Kippur. The same thing is, like I said before, with colors. White light is the most natural color. The prism is the bending of light, so then you have the different, the entire spectrum of the colors, the color scheme. So, psychologically and emotionally, this is coming to a state of not the superimposed state of a world that is so busy, but like I described before, when you go to the woods, or you go into a world of nature and you leave the man-made structures and you go into a world without structures, what happens? You suddenly become part of it instead of it becoming part of you. It becoming part of you. Here in a city like this, in any city, we control the elements. We've tamed the elements. We've cleaned out nature and built our own abodes and homes of concrete, metal, all man-made things. When you go into nature, you go back to a state where everything is the way it was meant to be. That's not man-made. So I'm not taking away what man makes. If it serves the world in a good way, great. But that's a natural state where we return to that essence and that core. In the level of soul, that's Yechida. Yechida is that one place. Achaz B'Shana, Yechida Liyardecha, a type of unification, a type of seamlessness, where you're completely absorbed in something greater than you. So Yechaya, what I said, the day for the fourth level of soul, which is on Shabbos, where there's 4 prayers, that, as I discussed at length before, that is you experience transcendence. But bittul, complete submerge yourself into something else, where you're completely absorbing another reality that's greater than you are, and you are being submerged in it, like a child in the mother's womb, or like when we immerse ourselves in the mikveh. That is Yom Kippur. A type of seamlessness, a silence. It's not how loud it is. It's all very bechashoy. It's a silent type of prayer. It's a silent type of experience. So the interesting thing that results from this is, if you want to know how deep your soul is, you have to think about that. We are so busy with the noises of our lives, let alone, forget about our technologies, addicted to our mobiles and our texts and all that stimulation. Even if you were to get rid of all these gadgets, we still live in a world that's full of all kinds of outer stimulation, hyper-stimulating all our senses. So obviously you're not going to be able to really see the depths of who you really are, because you're living vicariously through all these sounds. Just like some people live their entire lives vicariously through soap operas or through other shows. That's their life. the drama of someone else's life. This is the classic voyeuristic world in which we live. The best magazines that sell most are what? People, the gossip shows, celebrities. We live our life by watching others that are not even living real lives. That's the tragedy. But it's so stimulating. Well, you got to look at prime time. What is on television at prime time? That's when people are watching most. Watching others do things. America Got Talent, a very great idea. But you're watching someone else. What about your talent? What does it do? So some people say, well, when I watch this, it really motivates me to really access my talent. Okay, that's nice. I'd like to see how many people are actually really like going out there and working harder at actualizing themselves. We learn to fantasize. Maybe I can get on television or something. Maybe that's it. Now again, I'm not a fire and brimstone guy against technologies, but you got to call a spade at times. And no, you're living your life, you're living someone else's life. Sports, for all its beauty, and we watch human beings excel, push the limits, do things that are amazing, but at the end of the day, it's them doing it, not you and not I. What do they say about baseball? They say it's 60,000 people who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who don't. They don't say about football because some of those guys also need to lose weight, but I guess part of the game is their, we'll call it their bulkiness. And now with all the scandals about violence in football, the concussions, and just the violent nature of the culture. I just saw I don't know if you saw the New York Times book review this week. Is a review of a few books about football violence. Very interesting. How addicted we are to it. And that the description there from one of the big linebackers, already retired, he says there's no greater pleasure in life when you hit someone exactly in the right way where you're causing the most pain. So, and boxing is on the borderline, if you think objectively, would you want your children at the youngest of age to be exposed to that? Most likely not. So in other words, we grow into adults and we become desensitized. Again, I'm not here to knock. I know people are addicted to football. Football really did a good job. And I know other sports are not quite that violent and so on. But it's just a reflection of a culture that is not living its own life, it's living someone else's life. And not like they'll have their lives either. Frankly, they're on show as well. So who's anyone living their own life without effect by anything else? And that's why when you meet somebody that's completely not impacted by anything around them, they just sit at a table with a book or by themselves, and they completely can stimulate themselves without one iota of any other stimulation. These are magical people. The people who know the secret how to be. Just to be. I don't need to go somewhere to be. I don't need to go to a party. I don't need someone else to stimulate me. I don't need to watch anything. I don't need to break the tedium of monotony of my life. I stimulate from within. Imagine that for a moment. And that stimulation is far, far deeper and more sustainable. So when it's this type of period, Yom Kippur, it's exactly what it's about. Find out what your soul is like. But you can't do it if you allow the competition. The competition will drown out your soul because there's so much going on. Like even when I'm saying this, I can imagine some people, I'm sure not here, sitting here, saying, yeah, but 11 o'clock, I have my show I got to watch. While they're hearing this. Which is fine, do as you see fit, Now you're watching Simon Jacobson from let's say 8:15 till 10. And then, what's 10 o'clock? What's the next big show? That scene at the end of the Truman Show, the movie, the film. So they're watching him whole life. What's the last scene there? Those two truck drivers. They say, okay, what else is on TV? Once that goes off. We just need something else to addict ourselves to. And my point here is not to be negative, it's to be positive. You want to find yourself, you have to go into yourself. You're not going to get it from outside. Outside stimulation is very nice. Once in a while we need it. But discovering the depths of your soul is a journey within. And one of the big traps, besides our habits that I discussed earlier, and our past attitudes, is that we rely on other forces to try to stimulate. Yom Kippur is the ultimate day that there is no outer stimulation. So I know some people will say, when I go to synagogue, I can't wait to hear some of the songs. Excuse me. Some people go to synagogues where the cantor is putting on a show. Well, something that's not Yom Kippur. Maybe it's nice show, nice entertainment. A chazan was always meant to be the difference between a cantor and a shliach tzibur. And a cantor is performing, and a shliach tzibur is a messenger of the community, who actually says a very moving, he says a very moving prayer at the beginning of the service, that I humbly stand before you, God, and try to represent, as imperfect as I am, entire community. That's what a chazan is. They tell the story of the comparison between Pavarotti, who once got up and did an opera, a great rendition of Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." And he got a standing ovation for a beautiful rendition. Then came an old Jew, got up, and did his version of Tehillim Chav Gimel. Thank you. He did his rendition of Tehillim Chav Gimel. Hashem Roi, that the Lord is my shepherd. Instead of a standing ovation, he got everyone crying, weeping. So Pavarotti asked him afterwards, so why when I did it, they gave me a standing ovation, when you did it, they cried? He said, because you may know the psalm, but I know the shepherd. So Yom Kippur is a simple day. It's not about a performance. It's not about watching others do things. The reason we go to shul is because of the synergy of a group is greater than an individual. But in order to give you power, not for you to lose yourself. Yes, if you lose yourself in a healthy way where you get submerged, like I said, in the whole experience. But it's about experiencing the depths of your own soul. So I say this all because it's a way of preparing. If you want Yom Kippur to have its proper impact on you, you have to enter it with the proper attitude. You can't come in with an attitude of yesterday and expect new things to happen. Because then your attitude is dominating. You need to free yourself. Which is one of the reasons we do immerse in a mikveh once, twice, 3 times, in different customs. Because it's about trying to free yourself, kol nidre, freeing yourself of the vows, the oaths, annulling them, which essentially psychologically means freeing yourself from past commitments, all the traps, all the promises, all the things that bind you to a past, in order to free yourself for a new day, a new night. And then Yom Kippur can have its white effect on us. The effect of white noise, as they say. White noise, white light, purity. Bringing us back to the womb-like state as much as possible by trying to shut down all these extraterrestrial, extracurricular sounds, sights, and taste, touch, and smell. This taka Heyinuim also on Yom Kippur, Heyinuim, it's 5 as well. It's 5 forms of affliction. Affliction here in the sense of fasting and not washing and other things that we refrain from doing on Yom Kippur. But it's not about refrain, it's about allowing something deeper to emerge. So let me conclude with the following. What I began with. To me, it's the most tremendous thing when I meet somebody. Sometimes I close my eyes, sometimes I don't. Is to realize that what you see in front of you is only surface level. Every person has a tremendous amount of treasures and resources that are invisible to the naked eye, invisible to the person themselves. Like I said before with the subatomic particles, how far down does the rabbit hole go? Who knows? But it's very far. And when you take that attitude, that alone, number one, gives you a type of an optimistic view of every human being. This doesn't mean that you overlook people's behavior and things they do that may be inappropriate, but you realize that people have unbelievable potential, unbelievable beauty. That's how God created us. Now imagine if you could look at yourself that way. That would be the best counterforce to all our issues and problems. Because most of our problems may begin as a problem, but then your attitude comes in and you don't think you can do anything about it. So tell me, what do you think is worse? What's the bigger enemy? Someone who has a problem, but they know they can solve it, or someone who does not believe that they can solve the issue? Once you stop believing that you have the tools and the power to solve something, the problem becomes thousandfold worse, because now you have no more confidence. That's why you'll see somebody who may have less potential than another person, but the belief in themselves allows them to achieve things that the other person who has a lot more potential does not achieve. So it's about really learning to believe in yourself. Not in an arrogant way, not in a superficial way, but believing in the soul that you were given and its tremendous and awesome potential. This is the essence of this whole period in time. From my depths, and not depths, plural, which means many, many layers, more and more and more. Imagine also how that kind of euphoric, exuberant attitude you take to life, where you feel yourself constantly being able to reach deeper dimensions of your own inner self. Would you need other stimulation? Now, of course, we need to help each other, and we do get blinded, and the veils don't allow us to see that. That's why we talk about it, and that's why Ein Chavish Mater Satzme, a person who's in fetters, cannot free themselves. When we're biased and blinded, we don't see our own potential. But that's the key. And I can say this across the board. No matter what issue comes my way and people discuss with me their personal or other challenges, of course, it's customized and tailored to each individual. But overall, it's about empowering them to believe in themselves that they can solve the issue. A little help from my friends, but ultimately that they have what it needs. They have what it takes to resolve any issue. That confidence goes far greater power than actually the problem itself. So lack of confidence is far bigger problem than any problem in life. And that's what we're taught going to entering Yom Kippur, that you have that soul power. You have to do whatever it takes to find it, because this is life and death. A person who does not believe in themselves, like I said earlier, what's more tragic? One day you find out, I had all the power within me, but I didn't know. I was blinded. Something blinded me. That's like one of the saddest things to find out. It's one thing, I didn't have the ability, but you did have the ability, you didn't even know that you had it. Everything you were looking for was there right in front of you, and you had the capacity to do something about it. But what? You didn't believe it, or you didn't know. That's what these days are about, to help us recognize that and hold on to it for our dear life, and surround ourselves with people that reinforce that message. The opposite of finding people who constantly do the opposite, dampen, throw cold water, dismiss, cynical, and so on. People who believe in you. Because confidence breeds confidence. And you have a little, it gives you strength to go a little more. And obviously, God forbid, the opposite is also true. Lack of confidence breeds lack of confidence. You feel you fail in one thing, now I'm going to fail in the next thing, and the next thing. It becomes this type of domino effect. So I want to wish everybody the capacity to mamakim, to reach into the depths of your own soul. Find people that help you get there. And forget about what people think and their opinions. You're not here to satisfy anyone else. You have to satisfy your own destiny, your own calling. And find people that appreciate it. Obviously, people who know and recognize their own depths to some extent are the people who will also respect yours. Those that don't respect themselves, it's very hard to expect that they're going to respect you. So next time you feel somebody has said something or insulted you, or you feel is judging you, you say to yourself, you know what? They judge themselves, they don't respect themselves. Why should I care about someone who doesn't respect themselves? Obviously, they're not going to respect me. It's one of the tricks of the trade, if you need that. But above all, to find people and find yourself with the tools to access the inner parts. And Yom Kippur is a gift that's given to us. It's an opportunity. It's a day that comes and goes. But on that day, we get the closest we can to the core of our souls. And on that day itself, in the Ilah, the end of the day, is the deepest of the deepest. Now, if you don't take the attitude, if you don't enter with that attitude, very likely you won't feel anything. Very likely it'll just come, it'll dissipate. But if you do take that attitude, you may have an opening. Not to say you may, you definitely will have an opening that will change your life forever. The Tur, who was one of the first codifiers after Maimonides, And the Rosh, was codifier of Jewish law, writes that on Erev Rosh Hashanah, as Jews go into the high holidays, they wear white. Why? Because white was the color of, when you go to judgment and you come out innocent, white is the color of innocence. Black is the color of guilt. So the question is, they didn't get judged. They're just entering the day of judgment. So why are they wearing white already? And he says, because Ezu Umazu, Kareinu Alav. What kind of nation is this that knows the personality of God? Ufya Shalalakim. They know the personality of God. They know that no matter that they for sure will merit and come out victorious and innocent. So even before they go to judgment, they already know it. That's the belief in yourself and belief in others, belief that we have in it the power to overcome any challenge. So even before we even go to court, we're ready, sure that we are going to prevail. That's what he writes. And that's why they dress up, and that's why it's a holiday. Rosh Hashanah is a holiday. It's a holiday, we eat meals and so on. Yes, there's an element of judgment, but we go in with that confidence that we would definitely prevail. There was a custom in olden times of certain armies, when they went out to war, even before they fought the first battle, they would march, going out to battle with a victory song, a victory march. Why? How do they know? Because it's confidence. When you know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you know that light is not of the oncoming train, but an actual light at the end of the tunnel, you fight in a different way. It's the confidence. I know I can win. Very, very different. You see it even in sports and other forms. People don't think they can win. Usually that alone defeats them. You're convinced that I can win anything, and you let your mind carry you that way, you can ultimately be victorious, even in situations where you didn't necessarily have all the tools. Because its attitude is a tremendous amount, but ultimately it's because it's accessing the powers, the inner powers of the soul. So we should all be blessed to have some opening like that. Do your part, do the best you can. As I mentioned before, are there any 60 days here? There's some book 60 days if you'd like to get it, we have it here. But it's a great tool because I actually describe different meditations and methods to get to this point. And may Yom Kippur really be a cleansing day like that, clean slate, begin a new year, a new life actually. We could all use a new life, new attitudes, new approaches, new possibilities. And we should only celebrate together in a very beautiful way this entire year, a healthy year. Tavshinai Hey 5775, the Jewish calendar. Again, the class is dedicated by Lori Katz in honor of her grandfather's yahrzeit, Yecheskel ben Avram Avinu. The yahrzeit is October 5th. Kippur is this Friday night and Shabbos day. And then we go into the festivities of Sukkot, because the holiday of Sukkot will be starting Wednesday night. I know it's my night, but hey, the holiday takes precedent. So there will not be a class this coming Wednesday night, and neither the next, because the next one is the next holiday, Shmini Atzeret, and going to Simchas Torah. So the next class will be in 3 Wednesdays from today, which would be, today is the 1st, right? So 14. So next week is the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd. Right? 22nd. But a lot can happen in that time, and maybe you'll never need to hear from me again, because I want to hear good news, but I mean to say, you don't need to hear maybe these classes because you already have been so empowered, and we can talk about greater things. I know that came out the wrong way. I didn't mean it that way. I meant long life for all of us, healthy, good years. But Yom Kippur is the day of white, and then we come into Sukkot and we celebrate the purity and the submergence and the bittul that we experienced on Yom Kippur. Simchas Torah essentially is the celebration of receiving the second Torah, the chasana. But Yom Kippur we don't dance and sing in that way. It's more of a internal experience, intimate with God. And then Simchas Torah we break out in exuberant, unbridled joy. It should be a joyous year for everybody in every possible way. Anyway, we, the Meaningful Life Center, can help you. Please reach out to us, both those online, those of you here, and we should have a very meaningful year, with great activities, and hopefully we can continue this journey in greater ways and deeper ways. Plenty of things coming ahead. I'm very excited about all the future, and I hope you're excited about your futures. And we should dance at the weddings that we need to dance at this coming year. Everybody here at Meaningful Life Center has their dancing shoes already, so it's just a matter of You could print invitations and then, find the right person and you can fill in the name of your soulmate. It should be that easy. But anyway, my blessing is that it should be easier than we imagine, and everything is possible. Philip is giving his class tomorrow. Okay, so if you want to get in touch with us, you could email us at meaningfullife.com is our website. Any information, anything you need to know, it's full of resources, or call us, contact me or Velvel, our good team here. Everyone have a Shana Tova Masuka, a very healthy, sweet year. A blessed year in every possible way. Thank you.